Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast. This podcast is meant to bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. Whether you are a current or aspiring short-term rental property manager, host, or real estate investor, you're in the right place. Dive in with us to uncover the captivating stories and golden nuggets from industry heavyweights, including leaders, operators, investors, syndicators, founders, and entrepreneurs. So thank you. Really, thank you for embarking on this journey with me. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast, and I promise I'll do my best to deliver value-packed episodes that hopefully will not just inform, but also help inspire the next generation of real estate and hospitality professionals. Truly yours, Sebastián Muñoz. All right, welcome everyone to the Hospitality Edge podcast, the podcast where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. And today I'm very excited to have a very special guest, an industry veteran, Terry Whyte, owner and founder of Anna Maria Island Beach Rentals. Terry, thank you so much for being with us today. Tell us, where are you based? And tell us a little bit about, just how you got started in this vacation rental space almost 24 years ago, before it was as mainstream as it is today.
My primary residence is Toronto, Canada. All our properties are in Florida. We split our time. We're in Florida about 6 months out of the year, and we're here. We got started, just prior to when VRBO came on scene there. So we've seen a lot of ups and downs and sideways movements in this industry, and it's evolved in such a tremendous industry. It's to see where we started and where we are now, it's just incredible where we came.
Absolutely. So let's go back in time. Tell us a little bit about, how does a guy in Toronto end up, in Florida, and then how do you end up in vacation rentals in the first place? Just put us in context. Like, what were you doing? When were you first exposed to this industry back then? How was it? And what led you to see this as something that you could do as a business full time eventually, I imagine. So just put us in context. Where were you at, and how did you get into this industry in the first place?
Well, my wife and I were on vacation. So in Toronto, the weather's not the greatest in the summertime. So I'm all year around. So we decided to vacation in Florida. So we ended up on Anna Maria Island because my wife's sister knew about it and told us about it. And so the first time we went there, we stayed at a property that was for sale. And so my in-laws ended up buying the property. So they had it for a few years. And then I started managing it because we weren't getting any rentals. Things were just going bad with that rental agency. We were getting about 12 weeks out of the year out of it. So I started managing it. The first year I did 50 weeks, I think it was. And that's the worst year I've ever had in the industry. Since then. And then, so they bought it. And when they died, they left it to us. So then we ended up owning it. Then, so we had one property, and my biggest challenge was I was doing really good at marketing and stuff like that. And I was full all the time. So I remember my wife and I were having dinner one night, and I said, I need more properties. It was frustrating when people came to me and said, you want to come? And I said, sorry, I can't help you. So got to know a guy that he didn't live there. He owned in the same complex where we were. And I made him a guarantee. He was with a rental company. I said, I guarantee you, if you let me manage your company, guaranteed income will be this much. And so he said, okay, you could like that. And then that's where it all started. Would I make a guarantee again now? No. But when you're young, you do all kinds of crazy things. And so then it just got to be like word of mouth. And then people, when people start sitting around the pool, different owners, and they say, what's the deal here? How come that place is full all the time? That place is full all the time. Then people are just going to me and say, can you help me? Can you help me? And it just got to be word of mouth. And it started at 1, and it really just got to 50 without really doing any marketing or just, I was with Vintori, about 3 or 4 properties there. I paused it. I'm back with them now, trying to grow the inventory a little bit. But in between, I probably picked up like 40 properties just by word of mouth.
So let me make sure I understand the timing correctly. So you go, you see an opportunity, and then like how fast, or I guess like what's the timeline for you going from 0 to 50 properties? Is there because I, if I am understanding this correctly, I mean, you've been in this industry for many years, right? Was it a thing where for a few years you were, just managing a few properties, doing other things as well? I know you were with General Motors and whatnot, and then at some point you were like, okay, let's see if we can grow this a little bit further. Let's see if we can scale this a little bit further. And then more recently, so to speak, you decide to go all in type of thing into scaling this further. Let me make sure I understand the timeline correctly here. So
Yeah.
so
Okay,
how did things go from 0 to 50?
So one thing I forgot to left out is I worked for General Motors for 32 years. So I'm retired from General Motors. So I was doing both when I worked there, but I probably only had about 15 properties. And it was so long ago back then. I was actually, when I was at work, I was operating the business from my BlackBerry, when I was at work, and then I'd work on it when I came home. That's how long ago it was. But I could manage like 15 properties or so. But what really happened was in 2000 and around 2009, when the auto industry imploded, they came to guys like me and said, if you retire, we'll pay you a full pension. We'll give you a car. We'll give you $100,000 to stay home. And so at the time, it was just our youngest daughter was entering high school. It was a perfect opportunity for me to stay home with her, take her to school every day, pick her up, make sure that she did her homework every day. She was a synchronized swimmer. She swam almost every day in the pool, so I could drive her to the pool and back. And then, so what happened was when I retired, then I could really concentrate on growing the business. And and there never was any concentration because I'm 64 years old now. I really don't want to hire anyone. I've never wanted to hire anyone. I just wanted to be able to do this myself, be profitable, run a good, sustainable business. And that's what happened. So I just was able to just to grow it. And it was slow. Like it wasn't like all of a sudden I had 15 properties and then I had 50. It's been a slow growth. I found in the last number of years, I've grown faster in the last number of years just because of word of mouth, just because of technology, just because of podcasts like I'm on now here. Matt Landau was, meeting Matt was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in a career-wise. There, like people would have never heard of me before. I met Matt, and we became good friends. So a lot of things happened along the way. In 25 years, a lot of things transpire.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So okay, that's amazing. And so let's talk about that change in this industry, like from everything that has evolved from, of course, new OTAs coming into the industry to so many niche technology providers coming in and specializing into saying, I'm going to do this one thing for you, either pricing or channels or optimization or guest experience portals. Like what would you say when you look back at how things were being done in terms of running a vacation rental management business, right? Back then when you first started, and now you look at how things are done currently and the options that are available, what surprises you the most? Or what's the thing that you're like, my God, I can't believe how far we've come?
Technology. No, there's no question about it. It's technology. And if you look at what happened with COVID, the best thing that ever happened to our industry was COVID. If you would have asked any respected person in our industry on February the 1st, 2020, when do you honestly think vacation rentals will be competing with the hotel industry on an even basis? I think people would have said the general consensus would have been 7 to 10 years. On May 31st of 2000, we were competing. We're out competing the hotel industry. And the only reason we were able to do that was through technology. We have people talk about fragmentation in our industry and our technology this, technology that. The only reason that we closed that 7-year gap in about 4 months was because of the incredible technology that we had. COVID accelerated the word of mouth and put vacation rentals really on the map when COVID started. And it probably accelerated our industry, the vacation rental industry, between 5 to 10 years. 5 years would be a very conservative, number.
Wow.
But it really, 5 to 7 years. And we have the biggest difference, to answer your question, is technology. Without that technology, there's no way we could have did that. And we were in a really good position. And if you look at it too, like our technology isn't much older than COVID. It just so many things happen concurrently at the same time. There with COVID, technology really started taking off. Matt Landau and I, we started doing research on it. We built our own platform for choosing your best PMS, and then really started, people started taking technology seriously around that time. Then COVID happened, and then podcasting, there was so much going on, and then podcasting really caught fire. And then there was so much happening in industry, good things happening in industry. And then there were so many good voices in our industry that were there to get the word out too. So podcasting has been a tremendous, I would say in this industry that the most educational thing you can do is go to conferences like the RMA or, go to your Antons, stuff like that. Conferences, I would say, are the most educational thing you can do. And I would say the second most educational thing you can do is listen to the podcast. Sure.
That's very interesting. So there's two things I want to touch on there that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I want to dive deeper into the selection of a PMS and what you think are criteria worth considering for that. But before that, when it comes to the acceleration of COVID that COVID brought to this industry, that's such an interesting perspective, because I feel like that's what COVID did across many industries as well. We really saw an advancement that was, that was outside of proportions, right? Even in the medical, health medical, sector, when it comes to things you just had to do to adapt yourself. So, but when it comes to the vacation rentals, of course, trying to break it down and trying to think, okay, why did it happen? Why did COVID lead to that acceleration? Of course, one of the things that comes to mind is, people wanted to be at a place where they didn't have to be surrounded by other guests in a reception. So the logic, option was, let's go to a vacation rental. Florida just saw such a boom also when it comes to the lack of regulations, and people from Canada or, all over in the US, in other, other places where there were tighter regulations around lockdowns and whatnot, just were going to Florida, right? And gathering with their families and whatnot. But what else do you think, came from COVID that led to this 5+ years of acceleration of the industry that you're referring to? Is there anything else other than those two factors that, the voices you said in the space, but what else do you think led to this acceleration?
I'm not sure what led to it exactly, but you can just see, and you still see it to this day now, is people's desire to travel. People love to travel. We were very lucky. If you weren't shut down, there were so many fly to destinations, but being in a beach market in Florida, like I was just beneficiary like nobody else. What you really have to, and even to this day now, is people's desire to travel, and it's still there, and it's and you would think, like, we were locked down in Canada, we were locked down, most of Europe was locked down. United States was more liberal and stuff like that. But as soon as people had the opportunity to travel, they were out that door, and they weren't overly concerned about getting COVID either. They just wanted to travel.
Yeah. Okay. So before we jump into the PMS conversation, I just wanna ask you this, because you deal with homeowners, right? And because you're a property manager, and so every property manager, I think, is facing the challenge right now of explaining to homeowners that times have changed, right? It's no longer COVID where there was such a boom in the market. So first of all, is that even an issue for you as far as having homeowners struggling to understand this realization to a pre-COVID environment, and even in some cases we're below pre-COVID levels in certain markets and whatnot. Like, do you think that COVID also led to a boom, so to speak, a bubble, so to speak, with unrealistic expectations, a lot of investors buying in at very high home prices with historical with expectations of revenues that were just not sustainable? Is that something you're struggling with or dealing with right now with your homeowners? And if so, how are you tackling it? And how would you suggest property managers address it as well with their homeowners?
Okay, so you asked two questions there, so I'll answer them separately. First of all, do I have that problem with my homeowners? No, I'm not. Most of my homeowners have been with me for over 20 years. I have the lowest churn rate in the industry. I've lost one owner in 25 years. But the only reason for that is because I'm able to outperform the market. If I wasn't beating the market on occupancy and ADR, they'd leave me in a second. So no, do I have that problem? But to answer your question, is our industry in a bubble? For sure it is. And I'll take where we are competing here. Everybody and their dog bought a vacation rental during COVID, and then the rates we've seen, what I'm getting right now for a week, let's say in March, I was getting that for a month prior to COVID. So Is it a bubble? For sure, it's a bubble. Is it ever going to burst? I don't know. We're not going to. The rates aren't going back down to where they were, but I can see now. I'm picking up so much inventory because these people bought these houses and with these big mortgages, but they were able to make payments because of inflated revenue. But it's coming down. I think the day of reckoning is coming for these so-called revenue managers. Nobody benefited more from COVID than revenue managers, because basically your strategy was charge whatever you want, they'll pay it. So we're getting back to reality now. The day of reckoning is coming for these so-called revenue managers. It's where things are going to change in a big, big way.
Yeah, any revenue manager can be a superstar when it's good times, but when it comes to the difficult times, that's when you see the real superstars, right? Okay, so very interesting and very impressive. Yeah, go ahead.
I would include pricing tools. These pricing tools out there too. The day of reckoning is coming for them too.
Oh, you think so as well?
Yeah.
So you think we're going to see the winners and the losers, or do you think that the business model of just assuming that you can have a dynamic pricing algorithm through just scrape data is going to have to be rethought entirely?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think the perfect reflection of that is what happened this year in ADRs is people relying way too much on scrape data from these pricing tools and not paying close enough attention to market data, like something like you would use from key data. I paid almost zero attention to what these pricing tools are suggesting. And, other than occupancy, everything I do and all my data comes from source data, which is key data. So these pricing tools, I think they over predicted what was going to happen with pricing this year in a big, big way. And the ones that relied on that data really got hurt bad. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. You're seeing so much churn in this industry now, and churn really comes from occupancy and ADR. Some people say it comes fed up with their property not being abused or not being taken care of properly. But anytime a property manager is happy with the revenue, with their occupancy, they're happy. You just look at COVID. There was so little churn during COVID. Why? Occupancy, ADR. There's so much churn now. Why? Occupancy, ADR. And a lot of that blame has to go to scrape data and these pricing tools.
Interesting. And of course, key data is great in a market where they have enough professional operators that are using key data, so that in return they can actually be source data in other markets, they don't have a choice but to still scrape. But let me understand something. So when you say, when you look at the dynamic pricing tool, you're mainly just looking at occupancy. Everything else, you look at it from key data, which in your case it's source data. How do you then take the data from key data and turn it into a dynamic pricing strategy? So what you're saying is you're really limiting the input from these dynamic pricing tools. You're just using them to set up whatever you want to set up, but what you decide to set up is mainly based on what you see in key data, or how do you operationalize this understanding that you have of the limitations of scrape data?
Okay, so pricing tools, I use 4 different pricing tools, and 4 different companies. They just give me access to them. They don't care if I use them or if they just give me, here's your username, password, do whatever you want. So I use 50% of my inventory is on Wheelhouse, 50% of it is on Price Labs. I have access to 2 other pricing tools, but even with Price Labs and Wheelhouse, what they do is very difficult. So pricing is very difficult to do. I'll give you an example. In one complex, I have 14 units in one complex. Some of them are on Wheelhouse, some of them are on Price Labs. They just, for some reason, they just do a better job. And I have a duplex. One is they're both 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, side-by-side duplexes, A side, B side. Price Labs does a better job on B side. Wheelhouse does a better job on A side. Why? I have no idea why. But key data supports the numbers for sure. And then I'm loyal to anyone who can predict what's going to happen in the market without me manipulating their algorithms or their suggested price rate. So I have a account manager at Key Data. We meet every 2 weeks. We go over all the source data, what's happening in the industry. And then I go back to my pricing tools and I see, okay, who's getting it right, who's getting it wrong. And I just turn them off and on and switch properties around with them because, again, what they're doing is very difficult, what they have to do. And sometimes they do an amazing job. Sometimes they get it wrong. You can't blame them when they get it wrong. It's just because it's so difficult to do what they do. And a lot of times it's just based too much on scrape data.
My God, that's so interesting. And yeah, that's a question that I was going to ask you actually. Why do you think it is the case that some properties perform better in some of these tools and some perform better than in others? And I've asked this question as well to other people that have told me that they use multiple tools and when it's by market, you could say, okay, well, if it's by market, it's completely different markets, and this market just tends to do better with this dynamic pricing tool here, this other market with this one here. Okay, you were like, okay, well, I guess it comes down to how many clients they have in each of those markets. But you're looking at a similar market, the same market essentially, just different type of properties, and you're still able to see such clear differences in performance.
Exactly. I study it. I study every day. I study it every 2 weeks with my vacation with my account manager over at Key Data. And I'm only talking about my market. I don't compete in any other market but Florida. So what happens in other markets, I don't know. But I'm saying with my market, I know what's happening in my market. And I would say anybody who is using one pricing tool to price all their inventory is probably making a huge, huge mistake because they're not capable. They're not capable of, well, I have a duplex that's side by side. They're not even capable of getting both of them. Like for the one I just told you about, there's an A to B side. They're 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house. They're identical. The furnishing is a little bit different. Their suggested base rate, one of them is $495. The other one is $400. So how do you have $100 base rate difference when they're the exactly same property?
Wow, that's very interesting. That's super interesting. Yep. All right. Now, tell me more about, okay, so we've talked about what your strategy is when it comes to dynamic pricing tools, leveraging, many of them and seeing which one works best with which property. You mentioned earlier, you alluded to the fact that you had started a project that was centered around helping people select a PMS. It is the core element of a vacation rental tech stack. So it is a very important decision. It is a decision that's gonna, come haunt you later on if you don't take it correctly. So how do you approach this when you are talking with someone that is, gonna be growing fast, gonna be scaling? So of course you could say, okay, well, I'll go with what I need today. I'll go with the cheap option. But then, 1 year from now, you're going to be regretting that. And now you're going to be having to look at a PMS migration. So I guess what would you say are some of those decision-making criteria, and how were you approaching consulting people on what PMS they should use?
That's it. Well, like you said it already. You said it's the most important piece of technology that you have to get it right here. And it's so complex. Where do you start? Where do you stop? But I always tell people, if you want to make sense of this, there's 10 core components of a tech stack. So instead of looking at 100 different components of a tech stack and how crazy a PMS can be, and what can it do, what can it do. But if you look at a tech stack and break down the 10 core components of it and realize that your PMS is the core of it, it gets so much easier to understand. The 10 core components are your PMS, your website, your booking engine, your distribution, operations, revenue management, your CRM, guest relations, home automation, and digital marketing. But then how does your PMS come into play into this? And I've been saying it, I said in 2018, what was going to happen with the PMS world. And I said, Track was going to be the PMS of the future. And that's exactly what has happened. I would say right now that the future of the PMS is going to be fought between Track and Guesty. That is the future of what's going to happen in the PMS world. I said in 2018, it was going to be Track, and it's happened. Guesty is in play now here. I think that it's going to be between the two of them here. But to come right down to it, the best PMS you can afford is the best PMS for you. Yeah. And there's no two ways about it. And probably the biggest mistake I see people make is starting with a PMS that they outgrow within a year or two. But there's clearly PMSs out there now that are just above and beyond anything else in the market. I think there's going to be a bloodbath in the PMS market just because there's so many mid-tier PMSs that have been around for years, just doing the same thing, and not really good. But the other ones like Guesty, like Track, are really taking over our industry for sure.
Interesting. Now, Terry, I'm going to ask you a question that might be tricky, but just looking at your, how many years you have in this industry and how many, players you've probably seen come and go and whatnot. When you look at that ecosystem of technology providers that are out there right now, what do you feel is missing? What do you think is missing? What do you think no one is covering? What do you think is a gap? And you mentioned, you alluded to maybe also having built some of your own systems. So tell us a little bit about how do you think about what's missing, but also how do you then say, okay, that is missing. Should I build it or should I wait for someone to build it, in terms of, let's say, asking my PMS provider, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? Just opening tickets left and right. Like what's missing and when should you develop it?
Well, there's not a lot missing. There's so much good things happening in our industry. It's just people aren't seeing what is happening in our industry. And in 2018, when I said Track was going to be the PMS of the future, and then I've been on several panels of the VRMA panel when I was the only one in this industry that said this delusional theory of best-in-class PMS was nothing but delusion. Everyone else was saying, oh, it's going to be marketplace, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. And I said, no, it's never going to happen. And if you look at what's happening in our industry now, I was exactly right when I called it. And you look, we just talked about Track, we talked about Guesty. It's all going to be doing more and more and more on one single platform. Is it ever going to be to the point where a PMS will be the be all, the end all? There'll be no plug and play. No, that's never going to happen. But you just look at what's happening in our industry. So it's already happening with the PMS. You got Track, you got SD, they're just trying to build out that PMS just to be the all-in-one so-called solution. But then you look at the other, you just have to look at now and see what's happening with all the other software platforms in our industry. You look at the best platform in our industry that's not a PMS, which is Breezeway. 6 modules in Breezeway. What does it have in common? Doing more and more and more on one platform. They're the best platform, in my opinion, in the industry that's not a PMS. You look at other platforms like Enzo Connect. What do they have in common? Doing more on one platform. You look at DAC, more. Another one that we're probably going to hear more of is called Suite Op. It is another one.
Yeah.
They're almost every one of these platforms now is morphing themselves into a PMS light platform. They're not a PMS, but they're the best thing to a PMS and substitute of a PMS, and they're all doing more on one platform. And if you look now, you could take a good PMS, you could take Breezeway, you could take a pricing tool and take key data, and you would be, and then Enzo, let's say Enzo connected that or something like that. You would have a really, really solid tech stack. And when people say, I hear this all the time in these podcasts and stuff, oh, our industry, it's so fragmented. It is not. You just don't see the opportunity that's there. Like, go with one of these platforms there. Just quit thinking about this plug and play thing and this best in class, because it's never going to happen. Best in class will never happen. In fact, it will happen in the exact opposite way, which I said would happen years ago. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah. So what you're saying is basically just accept that you're going to have to choose someone that's best at something, and you're going to have to use them. You don't have to end up with 12 or 15 different tools. Just choose the ones that are trying to cover a little bit more than just their core scope, and find the best ones. Accept the fact you're going to have to put them together. And I like to use an analogy of, no matter what tool you put in place, at the end of the day, it's just a plane, and the plane needs a pilot. So I think it's also important to understand that no matter what tool you put in place, you're going to need someone that's going to take the time to learn how to use it, onboard it, set it up, keep up with it. Like, I think that's something where a lot of times the technology provider is going to be telling you, no, it's going to run itself, just plug it in. The pricing is going to run itself. You're going to, cross your fingers and close your eyes, and your RevPAR is going to be through the roof. Not the case. You actually need to be quite hands-on with these technologies if you want to succeed at using them.
And one thing I would say, you said to accept it. I wouldn't say accept it. I would say recognize it. Recognize the best platforms. Recognize the best platforms out there, why they're the best and why you should be using them. And it is all going to be, our entire industry is moving in that direction, is moving these platforms that are deeper, and deeper. And it's already happening. Look at Breezeway. Look at Enzo Connect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because it's not something that is necessarily targeted towards the professional operator, but with the recent Airbnb updates, there's conversations around PMS-like features that are targeted for the host, right? More the host than the professional operator. So of course, what they're wanting is to have you locked into the Airbnb ecosystem as a host. Do you think that's a move for companies like Airbnb, of saying maybe we're going to acquire PMS type of companies, or keep developing that even further and eventually open that up to the actual professional operator? Because the thing is, the professional operator is a small proportion of the overall inventory, right? So it makes sense for them to want to give the tool to the host. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that move from Airbnb of, mini PMS-ish type of features?
Well, it's the worst thing you could ever get into, because you really then only, to me, distribution is the future of our industry. Our industry is going back to its roots, where before VRBO started buying every relevant website around the world, before Airbnb came on scene, I think we're going back to our roots. And you already seen, just look what's happened in the last number of months. You got Marriott Homes and Villas is in. You've got Hyatt's in there last month. They're in. You got Walmart is in. You got American Express is in. It's only a matter of time before a major airline gets in. It's only a matter of time whether Amazon or Facebook or somebody wants it. And I think our industry is going that way. To answer your question about, I know Airbnb is more for the single host or somebody, when you're talking about the technology that they're using. Yes. Are they trying to introduce some kind of mini PMS? Are they trying to introduce some kind of guest communication tools and stuff like that? Yeah. And they're doing a pretty good job if you want to be on one platform. But if you're on one platform, like to me, I call it the closed loop. The closed loop in North America is VRBO and Airbnb. The closed loop in Europe is Booking.com and Airbnb. If you're caught up in that, you just look at now, you look at what's happened. Europe is open back up now. Cruise lines are open back up. All-inclusives are open back up now. If Airbnb and Vrbo worked during COVID, if you're caught that closed loop now, you're going to get killed. And I can say it depends on the month, so it's not every month. But right now, I'm getting, depending on the month, more reservations from Booking.com than I am from Airbnb. And if you're stuck on Airbnb and you're stuck on Vrbo, you are going to get killed in this industry. There's no question about it. There's way too much supply. Come on, you can't survive. It worked during COVID. It's not going to work now.
Yeah. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because, of course, you want to be on the main major ones. So there's no doubt about it. Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, Expedia. Then there's the ones that are coming in that you cannot deny, like Google and Marriott. You cannot just close your eyes and ignore the fact that they're getting into this space. But then you start going and you start getting into many niche type of OTAs, and there's more and more of those as well. And really, you could end up with dozens of OTAs that you're distributing to. We take an approach where it's like we understand that to be well positioned and well optimized and really make the most out of a platform and understand it, leverage it to its fullest capacity, kind of like what we were saying with the technologies. It's going to take resources. It's going to take time. It's never just click on a button from your PMS and the listing is going to be perfect. You're going to have to go into the listing and you're going to have to finish the settings there. You're going to have to really complete it from there. So when do you draw a line of like, okay, distribution is the future of this industry? Does that mean try to be in as many OTAs as you possibly can? Or where do you draw the line and you're like, okay, there's no marginal benefit from this additional OTA here that's just going to bring me one booking a year, but it's still going to take me time and effort to set up and maintain and try to figure out?
Okay, so my philosophy on distribution is I want to be listed on any relevant website worldwide. Anybody that wants to travel to Florida, whether they're in Scandinavia, whether they're in Latin America, whether they're in North America, I want them to see my properties and have a chance to book them. And then getting back, I know what you're saying there, getting back to one, even if I only got one reservation per year, if that reservation came in September during hurricane season and I got a reservation from one of my owners, would I take it? Yes, I would. So I know you can make the argument that why be on some OTA if it's only producing a couple bookings a year, especially if they come in primes. You're going to get many. Let's say they come in March in Florida, you're going to get it anyway. So you really don't want to be giving that up. But if it's coming in the shoulder season and you're well positioned here, there's going to be a lot of benefits to it. And my philosophy is, if somebody wants to travel to Florida, I want them to be able to book my property no matter where they are in the world. And I'll give you an example right now. Who would have thought of right now? I am getting so many guests coming from Argentina. And why? I had no clue. I've never experienced it before. Like Germany's always been from Europe. Germany was my top producer, and then from the United Kingdom, they another top producer here. All of a sudden, Argentina. Like, what's going on here? I have no. A lot of it has to do with Booking.com. It's not just so many bookings, but that reach that's coming. But then those ones that are coming from Booking.com, they're coming from Argentina. They'll book with me directly next time they come. So there's just even if you get one reservation from some OTA you've never heard of before, they'll come back to you again. So and basically, it really costs you. Even if you do the markup, like they charge 10%. Okay, everybody marks their rate up 10%. So it really doesn't cost you anything. And in the end, you're going to end up with a direct booking down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because you want to make sure that you get the booking once, and then next time you never get it again from an OTA necessarily. You try to do direct bookings. Curious to know when it comes to direct bookings, since we're talking about that, what is working for you in terms of driving direct bookings, because it's such an important effort for property managers to diversify and not be dependent on any one of these OTAs. But I feel like there's a lot of noise as well of what can be done. And a lot of people don't even try to go that route because they're like, well, I'm not going to compete against Airbnb, the big marketing dollars that they have, and this other OTA, so many of them. So what's working for you, and what would you recommend to property managers that are looking to get into a more aggressive direct booking strategy?
The number one question I get asked in this industry is there a secret to it? Is there a secret to success in this industry? And my answer is yes. And that's the secret is you can't have a weakness. And if you don't have a book direct strategy, you have a major weakness. And I know it's easy to let Airbnb do it, to let Booking.com do it, to let Vrbo do it. But to me, that is a major mistake in our industry. And I would say we talked about the tech stack. The two primary, the most important parts of your tech stack are definitely your PMS and your website. And you should have the best PMS you can afford, the best website you can afford. And the number one lesson I've learned in this industry is you have to spend money to make it. And I made a big commitment to my website, and I made a big commitment to digital marketing. So I have the best website I think I can build. The best company built it. I have maybe the best digital marketing firm. So here's my website. Here's my digital marketing firm. You guys do it. I just stay out of it. And I'm about 50% direct. Sometimes I have been as high as 70%. I wasn't high at 70% every month. It depended on the month that it was. And that was prior to COVID. After COVID, when the floodgates opened up, I dropped from 70% down to 50%, where I've stayed. And I'm happy. I'm really happy with the 50% direct book. But I'm really, really committed to digital marketing. I'm really, really committed to content marketing at the digital marketing firm. I don't, they spend X number of dollars on PPC, whether it's Google PPC, whether it's Facebook PPC, whether it's Instagram PPC. But the one thing that I'm insisted on is they have to be blogging every week without fail. They have to have 4 blogs going to my website, and I want constant content going to my website. Google's addicted to 2 things in life. They're addicted to money, which is their advertising, the PPC, and they're addicted to new relevant content. And to me, so to answer your question, that was a long-winded question about the importance of your website and direct bookings. That's my strategy.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, the challenge is making relevant content at scale, because, you can very easily draft something that makes no sense with, ChatGPT or whatever. But then if you really want to take that to the next level and really make it be content that will actually rank and whatnot, that's where you need to commit to it. Like you said, I like what you said. It's just, there's no other way around it. You either commit to it or you don't. And what you're saying is, if you don't, you're making a big mistake that you might end up regretting. So that is very, very interesting.
You have to be consistent. you have to be consistent with it too. And I would say you definitely should outsource it. But before you even go down that road, you have to have your best PMS. You have to have the best website. You have to have the best booking engine. Like what's the benefit of sending something to your website when you got a lousy website, you got a lousy booking engine, they're trying to book reservations and they can't book it, they get frustrated, they drop off and they go to Airbnb, so just before you start, and I've said this in the last presentation I was at VRMA when I said, we were presenting on Book Direct here is go to your digital marketing agency before you even build your website, know who you're going to hire. And go to them before you even start and say, this is my plan. This is what I want to do. Do you in agreement with this? Can you work with this? And that was my strategy when I did it. I already knew who my digital firm was going to be. When they committed, then I built out to what they needed.
Interesting. Now you talked about outsourcing. I wanna talk about outsourcing for a second. I want to hear your thoughts on how you look at outsourcing and how you look at what should be and what shouldn't be outsourced. Let's talk specifically about, say, revenue management. You mentioned earlier that that's an area where there's a lot of revenue managers that did very good during COVID, that now we're going to be realizing who's good and who's not. How do you look at outsourcing a key function like revenue management? Is this something you considered to be worth it, or of course it's going to depend on your own skill sets and interests and how much time you want to spend on it, but how do you personally look at outsourcing revenue management and how to find those revenue managers that really are not going to be they were not just good because of the market being good, but really they're going above and beyond and are actually going to have an impact on your business, right?
I think, going forward here, there's going to be separation, like I talked about separation to the PMS. There's going to be separation to revenue managers. There's some are clearly better than others. There's some are really good at what they do. I don't outsource it. I like to do it myself. I don't trust anybody not that they're better at it than me or know more than I do or less than I do. But there's two things in this industry that'll kill you faster than anything, and that's your rates and your reviews. It used to be two-dimensional, now it's three. It's your rates, reviews, and your distribution. But getting back to your question there, revenue management rely heavily on source data and then rely heavily on my pricing tools and just keep an eye on them. What they do, they're extremely good at what they do. I would never, ever try and operate without a pricing tool, without price labs, without Wheelhouse. I would never in a day try it because they're just better at it than what I do. They're right 80% of the time. I'm right 20% of the time. So I just kind of keep an eye on that 20% there, make sure it just doesn't go south in a hurry there. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing wrong with outsourcing it if you trust the government, if you know you're in good hands. How do you know right now who's a good revenue managers? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that right now. I think time is going to tell. It's going to come in a hurry here because with Europe open, cruise open and people, you're really going to have to know what you're doing in this industry. And Wes Melton said it better. He said it the best in the industry that I've ever heard it. He said, if they see a similar property for $1 less, they'll book it. And Wes is an extremely, extremely intelligent person. I've always, you hear things in the industry that never leave you. You always remember. And that's one thing and he's so right. That's why if you can have the best inventory, you can have the best tech stack in the world. If you don't price your inventory right, you're going to get killed. So that's one part there to answer your question. I wish I had the answer for it, but it's so important to me. I refuse to give it to anyone else but myself. But to be honest, too, my account manager at Key Data is Jennifer Talbert, and I really make a decision on rates and what I'm going to do without talking to her first. Yeah, that's why we meet every 2 weeks and we discuss our strategy for the next 2 weeks. What's working, what's not working, what are we just going to leave alone? So it's critical. It's critically important. Answer your question, Sebastian. I haven't got a clue who I would recommend for doing revenue management.
No, absolutely. And I think it's challenging, and it's challenging to make those kind of decisions. Listen, Terry. I think there has been so many valuable nuggets here that honestly, I really, really enjoyed this. I could stay here for hours, Terry, and have you on for hours and hours. And I think we could go on and on. I want to be respectful with the time here. We got 2 minutes to go, but I really want to thank you for taking the time. Maybe just to wrap up, Terry, with some last words on what can we expect from you in the coming months and years, and what's the vision that you have for both your company, Anna Maria Island Beach Rentals, as well as the industry at large, for the future?
I don't want to really talk about myself too much. The vision of the future is the vision what it's been for the past, but I do want to say Julie George paid you a real nice compliment there. She said you're real good at what you do, and this is one of the best podcasts I've ever been on, and you are real good at what you do. So I don't want to talk about me. I just want to give you credit for what you're doing too. So keep it up.
My God, Terry, that means a lot, especially coming from someone like you as well that has been on so many of those. So it really, really means the world to me there. I really, really appreciate it, and thank you so much for taking the time. Hopefully we'll see each other in Toronto in a few weeks, and for sure we'll see each other at another of the trade shows that are going to be coming up. So thanks again for your time, Terry. Really, really appreciated and enjoyed the conversation.
I look forward to meeting you too at some time.
Bye-bye.